Arrogant CEO sues ex-employee, then learns she's the company's new owner. The sharp clink of a champagne glass breaking against marble echoed through the grandiose boardroom of Donovan Industries. The room was a portrait of excess, sleek, high-backed leather chairs surrounding a glass conference table, its edges lined with gold trim. At the head of the table stood Victor Hensley, the CEO, his expression smug, his tailored suit impeccable. Behind him, a massive floor-to-ceiling window overlooked the city skyline, the golden hues of the setting sun reflecting his towering ego. Victor raised his voice to silence the murmurs of the assembled executives. "Today marks the dawn of a new era," he announced, gripping the edges of the table. "With our latest acquisition, no one can challenge Donovan Industries. Not even Claire Donovan." His lips curled into a self-satisfied grin, and the room filled with obligatory applause. In his mind, Claire, the former COO and his predecessor's protégé, was nothing more than a footnote in his meteoric rise. She had been unceremoniously ousted months earlier after Victor's calculated maneuvering. Her subsequent silence was interpreted as capitulation, and Victor had wasted no time leveraging the company's assets for a series of aggressive takeovers. One of these acquisitions, a seemingly insignificant firm called Nexus Tech, had just been finalized. Victor leaned back, exuding confidence, when his assistant, a young man who perpetually appeared on the verge of a nervous breakdown, entered the room. "Sir, there's a summons," he stammered, holding a manila envelope as though it might bite. Victor's eyes narrowed. He snatched the envelope and tore it open, his brow furrowing as he read the legal document inside. The words leaped off the page: breach of fiduciary duty. The plaintiff? Claire Donovan. The air in the room seemed to shift. Whispers began circulating as Victor's expression hardened. "She's suing me? After everything I've built," he spat, his voice dripping with disbelief and fury. One of the executives, an older man whose gray hair was combed to perfection, dared to speak. "Sir, should we be concerned? Claire is formidable." Victor's laugh was a sharp, disdainful bark. "Claire's a relic," he said dismissively. "She doesn't stand a chance against me or this company." He crushed the envelope in his fist. "Prepare the legal team. We'll bury her in paperwork." As he stormed out, his mind already churning with strategies to squash the lawsuit, Victor had no idea that Claire had been planning this moment for months. He also had no inkling of the bombshell waiting to drop in court, a revelation that would strip him of his power, his company, and his carefully constructed empire. Claire Donovan was no footnote. She was the author of the next chapter. Claire Donovan's heels echoed in the marble corridors of the county courthouse, a measured rhythm masking the storm brewing within her. Clad in a sharp navy blazer, she exuded the calm authority of a seasoned strategist, a woman who had been underestimated far too often. She glanced at the gold-lettered placard outside the courtroom door, Hensley versus Donovan. For a fleeting moment, her lips curled into a wry smile. Victor's arrogance had sealed his fate, but he wouldn't realize it until it was too late. Inside the courtroom, Victor Hensley's legal team was assembling. The lead counsel, a silver-haired shark named Gregory Vance, exuded an air of practiced confidence as he exchanged notes with Victor, who sat at the plaintiff's table wearing his trademark smirk. To Victor, this case was a formality, a routine flex of his legal and financial muscle to keep Claire in check. As Claire stepped into the room, Victor barely spared her a glance. The judge, a stern-faced woman with piercing eyes, called the court to order. "Ms. Donovan," she began, "you've alleged a breach of fiduciary duty, fraudulent practices, and corporate sabotage. This is quite a list of claims." Claire rose, her voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that Mr. Hensley has engaged in practices that not only violated corporate ethics but also harmed the very shareholders he claims to represent." Her words hung in the air, every syllable measured to land like a hammer. Victor scoffed audibly, earning a sharp glance from the judge. "Your Honor, this is nothing more than a desperate attempt by a disgruntled former employee to tarnish my reputation," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. Claire's attorney, Elena Marks, a petite but formidable figure, stepped forward. Your Honor, with the court's permission, we would like to introduce a document into evidence. The judge nodded, and Elena handed a folder to the bailiff, who delivered it to the bench. As the judge examined the papers, a murmur rippled through the courtroom. Victor leaned toward Gregory, whispering furiously. "What is this?" he hissed. Gregory's confident demeanor faltered as he scanned the documents Elena had provided. His brow furrowed. Your Honor, Elena continued, her tone razor-sharp, this is a notarized contract indicating the recent acquisition of Nexus Tech by Ms. Donovan. As of 3 weeks ago, she is the majority shareholder and CEO of Donovan Industries. Victor froze, the color draining from his face. The courtroom erupted into whispers, the shocked hum of disbelief filling the space. This can't be true. Victor blurted, standing abruptly. She's lying. The judge banged her gavel. Order in the court. Mr. Hensley, sit down or you will be held in contempt. Claire's expression remained poised, but her eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. She turned to face Victor directly for the first time. You didn't think I'd just disappear, did you, Victor? She said, her voice low but carrying across the courtroom. While you were busy celebrating your victories, I was rebuilding what you tried to destroy. And now, Donovan Industries is mine. Victor's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Gregory's composure had all but disintegrated as he fumbled through his papers. The judge, now fully engrossed, leaned forward. Ms. Donovan, are you prepared to substantiate these claims with documentation? Claire nodded. Yes, Your Honor. And this is only the beginning. As the judge adjourned the court for a brief recess, Victor's empire began to tremble under the weight of Claire's revelation. Outside, reporters clamored for a statement, their cameras flashing like lightning in a gathering storm. Claire's lips curled into a small smile as she strode past them, her steps steady and purposeful. Victor had declared war, but he had underestimated his opponent. The catalyst for his downfall had been set in motion, and Claire wasn't about to let up until every last piece of his empire was hers. Victor Hensley's meticulously crafted facade of control cracked as the courtroom emptied for recess. For the first time in his career, he felt the icy grip of fear closing around him. He paced the hallway outside the courtroom, barking into his phone. Find out how she managed to buy Nexus Tech, he hissed. I want every detail. She can't just waltz in and take what's mine. Meanwhile, Claire Donovan stood near the courthouse steps, her phone buzzing with congratulatory messages from a handful of allies who had remained loyal during her exile. Elena Marks joined her, holding a stack of files and wearing a rare, satisfied smile. You delivered that beautifully, Elena said. But this is just the beginning. He's going to fight back harder now. Claire nodded. I'm counting on it. The harder he fights, the more mistakes he'll make. Her tone was calm, but there was a spark of steel in her eyes. She had learned during her years as COO that Victor was most dangerous when he was cornered. Yet this time, she held the higher ground. Back in the courtroom, as the session resumed, Victor's attorney, Gregory Vance, was visibly rattled but composed enough to challenge Claire's position. Your Honor, Gregory began, adjusting his glasses, the acquisition of Nexus Tech is highly irregular. We suspect insider trading and would like to request an injunction to freeze the transfer of ownership until further investigation. The judge raised an eyebrow, her pen hovering over her notes. Ms. Donovan, do you have a response? Claire stood, her confidence radiating across the courtroom. Your Honor, I anticipated such accusations and have provided full transparency in all filings with the SEC. She handed a folder to the bailiff. This documentation includes financial statements, communication records, and legal counsel reviews verifying the legitimacy of the acquisition. I also welcome an independent audit to confirm my compliance. Victor's jaw tightened as the judge perused the documents. Every calculated step Claire had taken was becoming clear to him. She hadn't merely planned for retaliation, she had fortified her position so thoroughly that his usual tactics were useless. Outside the courtroom, the ripple effects of the day's revelations were spreading. The board of Donovan Industries, most of whom had been handpicked by Victor himself, scrambled to convene an emergency meeting. They weren't just facing the fallout of Claire's return, whispers of corporate mismanagement under Victor's leadership were beginning to surface. One such board member, Meredith Lang, sat in her corner office, reviewing an email from an anonymous whistleblower detailing questionable financial transactions orchestrated by Victor. She frowned, her mind racing. She had always admired Claire's ethical leadership, and now it seemed Victor's ambition might have crossed into dangerous territory. By the time the courtroom session ended, Victor's temper had reached a boiling point. He cornered Gregory in a side hallway. "You're supposed to be the best," he growled. "How are we losing this?" Gregory held up his hands defensively. "Victor, you need to stay calm. She's playing a long game, but we can still outmaneuver her. We just need time." Victor's eyes narrowed. Time is the one thing we don't have. Across town, Claire walked into a quiet cafe where a group of former Donovan Industries employees waited. These were individuals Victor had fired or driven out during his reign. They greeted her with cautious optimism. "What's the next move?" asked David Harper, the former head of product development. Claire placed a folder on the table. "We're building our case not just on what he's done to me, but on how he's compromised the company. Financial fraud, mismanagement, and retaliation against whistleblowers. It's all here." David nodded. "You're putting everything on the line, aren't you?" Claire's expression softened. "I already lost everything once. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about taking back what's rightfully ours and ensuring he can't hurt anyone else." As the group strategized, Victor made his countermoves. He issued a company-wide memo calling for loyalty and warning against associating with external threats. He leaned on board members, promising increased dividends and new opportunities if they stayed in his corner. But cracks were forming. The anonymous whistleblower's email circulated beyond Meredith Lang, landing in the inboxes of investigative journalists. By midnight, one major news outlet was already drafting an exposé on Donovan Industries' internal corruption. Victor Hensley's empire was no longer just under attack, it was beginning to implode. And Claire, watching from a distance, knew the struggle was far from over. For her, the battle wasn't just about reclaiming her position. It was about dismantling the toxic foundation Victor had built and creating something stronger in its place. The grand conference hall at Donovan Industries headquarters was abuzz with tension. Board members, executives, and legal counsel filed into the room, their expressions a mix of confusion and dread. At the center of it all was Victor Hensley, standing at the head of the gleaming mahogany table, his face an unsettling mask of forced composure. "Let's get this over with," Victor snapped, waving a hand to quiet the murmurs. The board meeting had been hastily convened after a damning exposé published that morning revealed financial mismanagement and retaliatory tactics under his leadership. Outside the towering glass walls, reporters and protesters crowded the building entrance, their chants faint but insistent. Claire Donovan entered the room, her stride unhurried, her presence commanding. Dressed in a crisp white suit, she carried an air of purpose that silenced the room more effectively than Victor's barked order. Elena Marks followed close behind, her arms clutching a bulging leather briefcase. "What is this?" Victor demanded, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "You think walking in here uninvited is going to intimidate me?" Claire paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. She turned to the board members, her gaze steady. "I'm here to discuss the future of Donovan Industries. A future that no longer includes Victor Hensley." Gasps rippled through the room. Victor's fists clenched against the table. "You've got some nerve," he snarled. "This company is mine. These people work for me." Claire stepped forward, placing a thick stack of documents on the table. "Not anymore," she said. "As of this morning, I own 51% of the company's shares. Effective immediately, I am the majority shareholder and the rightful CEO. The room erupted into chaos. Board members exchanged frantic whispers while Victor's legal counsel sifted through the documents. One of them, a junior attorney, blanched visibly. She's right, he stammered, showing a page to Gregory Vance. Victor's face turned a deep shade of red. This is a hostile takeover, he spat. Illegal and unethical. You won't get away with this, Claire. Claire held her ground, her voice unwavering. Hostile, perhaps. Illegal, no. I've operated within every legal boundary, Victor, something you've never been able to claim. And I'm not done. Elena stepped forward, opening the briefcase and distributing copies of a second set of documents. These are affidavits from current and former employees detailing your history of financial misconduct, workplace retaliation, and discriminatory practices, Elena announced. They've been submitted to the SEC and DOJ as part of an ongoing investigation. Victor's composure shattered. This is a witch hunt, he bellowed, slamming a hand on the table. You can't believe any of this. These are lies fabricated by disgruntled employees. Meredith Lang, a senior board member, leaned forward. Victor, she said, her voice cool, I've seen enough evidence to know this isn't a fabrication. The board has a fiduciary duty to protect this company, and right now, you're the greatest liability we face. Victor's head whipped toward her. You've always backed me, Meredith. Don't turn your back now. I backed results, not corruption, she replied evenly. The tension in the room reached a breaking point as Claire pulled a USB drive from her pocket. This, she said, holding it aloft, contains a full report from the forensic audit I commissioned. It details the millions you siphoned into shell accounts, the falsified earnings reports you fed to shareholders, and the countless NDAs you used to silence whistleblowers. This report has already been shared with federal investigators. Victor lunged across the table, his fury boiling over. You think you're untouchable? He shouted. This company is mine. My name is on every cornerstone. And soon, your name will be on an indictment, Claire shot back, her calm demeanor unshaken. But before that happens, you're going to step down. Meredith stood, addressing the room. Board members, I'm calling an emergency vote to remove Victor Hensley as CEO and to instate Claire Donovan effective immediately. All in favor? Hands shot up across the table, one after another until a clear majority was reached. Victor's face was a study of disbelief and rage. He slammed his chair back and stormed toward the door, pausing only to glare at Claire. You think you've won? He sneered. This isn't over. Claire met his gaze, her voice quiet but firm. It is for you. As Victor stormed out, the room exhaled collectively. Claire turned back to the board, her expression softening. This is a new beginning, she said. One built on integrity and shared success. Let's get to work. Outside, as she left the building, Claire was greeted by a wave of reporters. The flash of cameras lit up her path, but she remained composed, offering only a brief statement. Today marks a turning point for Donovan Industries, she said. We're moving forward, stronger and more united than ever. As she stepped into her waiting car, Claire allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. The fight was far from over, Victor's threats loomed, and the investigations would take months. But for the first time in years, she felt the weight of her exile lift. Donovan Industries was hers once more, and she would ensure its future burned brighter than ever. The sun had barely risen over the Donovan Industries headquarters when Claire Donovan stepped into her new office. The expansive corner suite, once Victor Hensley's domain, now reflected her style, modern yet grounded, with an emphasis on transparency and collaboration. A simple plaque on the desk read, Claire Donovan, CEO. For the first time in months, the weight of uncertainty seemed to lift, replaced by a quiet determination. Her first act as CEO was to convene an all-hands meeting in the main auditorium. Employees filled the room, their faces a mixture of curiosity and hope. Claire stood on the stage, flanked by Elena Marks and Meredith Lang, both of whom had been instrumental in her return. She surveyed the crowd before speaking, her voice calm but resolute. "Today, we begin a new chapter," she said, her words met with murmurs of agreement. Donovan Industries was founded on innovation and integrity, values we've strayed from in recent years. But together, we'll reclaim that vision. She outlined a series of immediate changes: enhanced whistleblower protections, the creation of a diversity and ethics committee, and an internal audit to address any lingering misconduct. Her speech concluded with a promise: this company isn't just mine. It's ours. And we will rise together. The applause was thunderous, a wave of unity that reverberated through the auditorium. Claire felt a swell of pride but knew the road ahead would be arduous. Donovan Industries had suffered under Victor's leadership, and rebuilding trust, both internally and externally, would take time. Meanwhile, Victor's downfall was far from over. The SEC and DOJ investigations accelerated, fueled by the forensic audit and whistleblower testimonies Claire had submitted. Media outlets reported daily on the scandal, detailing the depth of Victor's corruption. By the week's end, Victor was arrested for fraud and embezzlement, his carefully curated image in shambles. Claire's personal life also began to heal. After the boardroom battle, she reconnected with old colleagues who had been driven away by Victor's toxic environment. David Harper, the former head of product development, returned to lead a newly restructured innovation team. "Feels like coming home," he told Claire during their first team meeting. "It is," she replied, a smile breaking through her usual professionalism. As weeks turned into months, the company's culture shifted. The newly established Diversity and Ethics Committee uncovered and addressed systemic issues, fostering a workplace where employees felt valued and heard. Profits stabilized as shareholders responded positively to Claire's transparency and ethical leadership. One afternoon, Claire visited the company's rooftop garden, a project she had championed during her time as COO. It had fallen into neglect under Victor, but now it was thriving again, much like the company itself. As she stood among the greenery, Elena joined her. "It's not often we get to see justice served so neatly," Elena remarked. Claire smiled, her gaze on the city skyline. "It's not about neatness. It's about ensuring what we build now has stronger foundations." Below them, in the office halls, laughter and conversation filled the air. Donovan Industries was no longer a battlefield, it was a community. And for Claire, this was the ultimate victory. Months later, the world had moved on, but the story of Claire Donovan and Donovan Industries remained a benchmark for corporate reform. On a crisp autumn morning, Claire stood at the podium of a packed auditorium at a leadership conference in New York City. The audience was a mix of industry leaders, students, and professionals eager to hear from the woman who had not just reclaimed her company but transformed it. Claire began, her voice steady and reflective. "When I first stepped into Donovan Industries as its CEO, it wasn't just about taking back what was mine. It was about redefining what leadership should be. It was about dismantling a culture of fear and replacing it with one of accountability and inclusion." She paused, letting the words sink in. On a screen behind her, images of the revitalized Donovan Industries flashed, employees collaborating, innovation hubs bustling with energy, and the newly reopened rooftop garden, a symbol of renewal. "Leadership isn't about wielding power," Claire continued. "It's about earning trust. It's about knowing that every decision you make impacts lives, not just profits. And when we lead with integrity, the ripple effects can transform more than just a company. They can transform an entire industry." The audience erupted in applause, but Claire wasn't finished. Victor Hensley's downfall was a cautionary tale, but it was also an opportunity. It forced us to confront hard truths about the systems we allow to thrive. Those truths were uncomfortable, but they were necessary. Growth always is. As she stepped away from the podium, a young woman in the audience raised her hand. "Ms. Donovan, what advice would you give to someone trying to make a difference in their organization?" Claire smiled. "Never underestimate the power of persistence and integrity. Change is never immediate, and it's rarely easy. But if you stay true to your values and focus on the bigger picture, you can achieve more than you ever imagined. The conference ended with a standing ovation, but for Claire, the applause was secondary. Her real reward was seeing the seeds of change she had planted, both within Donovan Industries and beyond, taking root. As she left the auditorium, she felt a deep sense of purpose. This wasn't the end of her journey. It was just the beginning of a legacy.